Welcome to the realm of heroes and monsters. Story time with your host, AP Fuchs. Stories of intrigue, stories of horror, stories of superheroics, stories of monsters. Get ready, the thrill ride begins.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Here we are, another episode of Story Time with me, AP Fuchs. Well, actually, the full title is Realm of Heroes and Monsters Story Time with AP Fuchs, but sometimes I abbreviate it for you, keep things moving, so to speak. Anyway, welcome to the show. Welcome back. Thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate it. It's good to be with you every week, and I enjoy creating these episodes for you, sort of a way to connect. And I don't know your name, who's listening. I don't know your background. I don't know where you are in life, but just wanted to say a special welcome to you. Welcome back, and if you're new, welcome aboard. And today, in the first portion here, we always talk pop culture and that sort of stuff. And we think of pop culture, we always think of Comic Cons and those types of events, comic shops and toy collectible aisles and, fandom, right? But pop culture also involves other things, and horror is one of them. And in my case, I specialize in monsters. Those are my things. And some people think that might be a limiting, I guess you could say, genre. If you stick with it just within the monster realm, instead of going to other things like haunted houses or possessions or whatever, And I disagree with that. I think whatever element of the horror genre that you pick to work in, it could be the whole spectrum of it, or if you just pick a segment of it. In my case, monsters. That's my segment. I like that. I like monsters. For me, I've always viewed them as sort of more supervillains than monsters. It's just my superhero brain. It's just the way it looks at it. But there's a lot you can explore within that niche. And I wanted to talk about a story we all know him, everybody knows him, Stephen King. He did something in one of his works that is very hard to do, and that is scare the reader. Now, yes, he's written a lot of scary fiction. That's why he's famous. One of the reasons, anyway. But to put fear into something, no matter what chunk of the horror genre that you're a part of, or write in, or draw in, to put an element of fear in there is tricky, because what's scary to me might not be scary to you, and vice versa, right? But Stephen has a way of tapping into relatable fears so that most readers, not all, but most, when they pick up his stuff, get some element of fear out of it, And he wrote this story in his short story collection. The short story collection is called Everything's Eventual, and he wrote a short story in there called The Road Virus Heads North. And I don't scare easily, but this particular story, and it was a story. This is not visual, like on a movie or nothing like that. This was like completely in my imagination, completely Stephen's words doing this to me. But he wrote a story called The Road Virus Heads North, and the basic premise of the story is this guy, he goes to this garage/yard sale, and he finds this painting, and he likes it. He picks it up and goes to take it home, and he has it in his car, and he's driving home, and on the painting is a picture of a guy on a motorcycle. And so whatever, the guy's driving along, and he's thinking about this painting, he likes it, but then in his rearview mirror there's a guy on a motorcycle, and he's following him. And as the story progresses, the driver, the guy who bought the painting, he's trying to evade this guy who's sort of tailing him behind but this motorcycle is always on him. And it turns into this story of cat and mouse. And I don't want to spoil the ending, so I got to be careful here. But the whole time, this guy is suddenly overwhelmed with fear, and he kind of puts two and two together that this painting and this motorcycle guy they're connected, and it scares the crap out of him, and it scared the crap out of me. And then when the ending comes, it's a huge punch in the gut, or a punch in the heart, or wherever you feel your fear. It just nails you right in that spot. And Stephen did that by hinting at what could be, because that's what fear is about, right? Fear is about the unknown. That's why we get scared, because we don't know. When we know the answer to something, whether it's good or bad, that puts us at ease. Even if it's a bad thing, at least it takes us down a notch, because we understand whatever the bad thing is. But when you don't know, that's when it becomes scary. And Stephen hit all those notes in this story on the unknown, and playing into this guy's emotions and his thoughts. And I related a lot to this main character and what he was feeling and what he was thinking. I got afraid. I got genuinely afraid. And I finished the story, and again, the ending, it hits you hard. For me, it was like I talked in an earlier podcast, like how much the ending of Blair Witch scared me. It had that kind of ending. It had an ending that just, you go, oh, like, what did I just read? Oh my gosh, I'm afraid now. That kind of thing. So, yeah, the unknown, fear. And, man, we all deal with it. And to sort of segue into the next part, fear for all of us, here's a little life tip. I mean, I've talked to therapists, I've talked to doctors, I've talked to counselors about fear. And I asked, the basic question was basically like, how do you beat fear? Because no one likes to feel afraid. And I'll admit, I have an anxiety disorder, and anxiety in and of itself is rooted in fear. That's the root of anxiety, is fear. And so, knowing the root, I wanted to get rid of it. Right? I did not that you could be fearless. That's impossible for anybody. But even Daredevil, yeah. But so I asked the question. Basically, was how do you get rid of fear? And there was one answer that was consistent throughout the whole thing. There's no medication for it. There's no mindset. There's no therapy. There's therapy after a fear event, sure, but there's nothing there's no book, there's no secret. There's one thing that you can do for fear, and that's face it. It's an uncomfortable truth. It's an unwanted truth often. It's not something anybody wants to hear, but the truth is that is the only way to beat fear, is by facing it and going through it if it's an event that you need to go through. So, yeah, that's my life tip for you on this podcast episode. And anyway, the next thing, let's get into some creativity here. Axiom-man. Yes, finally. It's been a long time since the last adventure. The last adventure was Axiom-man Rumblings, and that was to set the stage for what's to come. And me writing the series, I'm at a point where, frankly, I need to finish this story arc, period. Like, I'm at that point in my brain, in my heart, in my emotions. And it's a 3-part story, so it's like it'll be like a novel slot, then there's a novella, then a novel again, and it's a 3-parter because the ending. This wraps up the first story arc of the overall series, so it needs to be a larger story. But the thing with Axiom-man, what I was trying to do when I started the series, is I wanted to start him off small, and I did. and by small I meant I put like a lot of limitations on him in terms of his powers. I put a lot of limitation in terms of the type of stuff he would encounter, even though he did encounter major high stakes in a lot of the stories. But I kind of had to hold back a lot because I had to bring him to a point where he could be the hero that he is in my mind, that he is yet to be revealed to you as a reader. But I had to bring him to that point. I wanted to show his growth. I wanted to show him learn lessons from his powers. I wanted him to learn lessons from life, learn lessons from fighting bad guys, learn lessons with love. In his case, Valerie, the love that he has of his life. He just loves her to bits. And so we're writing Axiom-man, and we're getting through the story, and it feels good, like going into an Axiom-man story for me as a writer is, it's already its own established world. When I get into it, when I start writing an Axiom-man story, my brain shifts gears, and I write, I guess you could call it the Axiom-man style, so to speak. It's like if you read the Axiom-man saga, and then you read some of my other stuff, you'll see a change in voice. There's a different tone to it, and a different ordering of the words. It's not it's not that I sit there and think and like purposely do it. It's just how it is. Like, it's just how it comes out. So there is a contrast in the storytelling styles between the Axiom-man saga and then the rest of my other stuff. And so here we are. We're back in Axiom-man's world, and we're really going to be pushing him hard on this one. We have to, because he has to become what he needs to be in order to then continue on to the next large story arc that's happening after this one that's going to wrap up. And without these events of these 3 books that are coming, he won't get there. So that's what I'm into. That's where the headspace is at. That's what we're working on. And I look forward to releasing it all to you guys in the new year. And I hope you enjoy the stories when they do come out. But anyway, speaking of stories, let's zip back to horror a little bit here. The story you're about to hear is one where I don't know what kind of headspace I was in, but it's one where, let's just say, it has to do with a beast, has to do with some fear, and it has to do with letting go. And you'll see what I mean when you listen in, starting now. Episode 15, Shedding the Skin. It had been living inside him for so long that it didn't know if it could break free. His body was its home. But it had come to this place before, the time to shed the old skin and find a new, younger host. It was a lion. Its name, as dubbed by the press, Beast of Night. Beast lived in the body of Herman Gordas, but it wasn't much of a body anymore. Herman was a paraplegic, his neck having been broken when Beast tangled with the swamp monster of Spirit Swamp a long time ago. Before, on the nights when the northern lights danced like wisps of bright cloud on a chalkboard, coming out of Herman was easy. Now, coming out was difficult, as Herman, having resigned to being a 72-year-old man in a wheelchair, had stopped feeding Beast the anger needed to be released. Beast was on his own. These past few months when the northern lights graced the sky, Beast could feel them, sense them, hear them call. But Herman, unbeknownst to himself, would keep the lion contained. It was time to break free. Here, inside this body, there was darkness. The only light that came in was when it was day, the sun's rays shining through Herman's old flesh in an odd array of oranges and reds while he was out in his wheelchair, his nurse having taken his shirt off so he can get some sun. It was night now, and Beast had no light to guide him in his task. "I'm leaving," Beast told Herman. Herman gurgled something in his sleep. That was all. Goodbye. forepaws pressing against Herman's ribcage, Beast let his claws break free. They punctured the flesh, and a spurt of blood splashed Beast in the face. He didn't mind. It fueled him to dig further. Herman awoke, and Beast felt him trying to find the strength to scream. He didn't want his friend to suffer. Quickly, he scraped away Herman's lungs, the flesh leaking down the interior of the ribcage like oil on a wall. Bone. There was bone in the way. Beast brought his paws back, then thrust them forward, his claws poking through the gaps in the ribcage and through the muscle and skin on the other side. For the first time ever, his claws probed the air of Herman's bedroom. He curled his paws, the pads finding purchase on Herman's rib bones. Beast pulled, and the bones tore apart, snapping like dry twigs, blood splashing as high as the ceiling. Like a dead man rising from the grave, Beast rose from Herman's body. His friend lay there, his chest a messy heap of skin and bone and flesh, ripped and torn in pink and red folds. Beast blinked his eyes and saw the world for the first time in years. Tonight, he would find a new host. Thanks for sticking around to the very, very end. And since we were talking about fear at the very beginning of the episode, here's something to maybe put you on edge when you go to bed at night. Did you know that in our lifetime, odds are when you're sleeping, you're going to swallow about 10 spiders and 70 other types of insects, and you won't even know, and they're going to be inside you. But there you go. So, good night. Sleep tight.